Good morning and welcome to Walk Before You Run. Today, excuse me, today let's walk through Hebrews 11 and talk about an example of his faithful love. An example of his faithful love. You know, when I have read the story of Abraham and him going to that altar with Isaac, I never thought about it in this way. But in Hebrews 11, that story is recounted. And so let's just take a look at it. In verse 17, it says, by faith, Abraham, when he was tried, and that word tried also just means tested, offered up Isaac, and he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said that in Isaac shall thy seed be called, according that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from whence also he received him in a figure. And that word figure means figurative sense. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. By faith, Jacob, when he was a dying, blessed both the sons of Joseph and worshiped, leaning upon the top of his staff. By faith, Joseph, when he died, made mention of the departing of the children of Israel and gave commandment concerning his bones. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents because they saw he was a proper child, and they were not afraid of the king's commandment. By faith, Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. Wow. So I just wanted to take a look at specifically verse 17, where it says, by faith, Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac, and he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son. And when I was reading that this morning, I thought about he did that. And that was like an example of God's faithful love, because God told Abraham in this particular instance that he was not supposed to harm his child, because Abraham, even though he was going to offer up Isaac, when Isaac asked him, Father, where is the lamb that's to be offered up on the altar? Abraham didn't understand it fully, but he said God will provide for himself a lamb. And then in that moment of sacrifice, God showed Abraham the lamb that was in the bush that was to be used as a sacrifice. And so it was like a test of Abraham's love for God. Sometimes when God blesses us, we love that blessing more than we love the blesser. And Abraham showed how faithful he was to God, because even though he trusted God, he believed what God told him about Isaac being the seed that would provide more seeds, more than could be counted. Even though he believed that, he was willing to follow God and trust him and be faithful and do what God was telling him to do, even though he didn't understand it. And that's a challenge to us. Sometimes when we are blessed with something and it looks like God is asking us to give that blessing up, or do something that we don't understand, are we willing to trust the faithful love of God to do what he is leading us into, even though we don't understand it, trusting and knowing that all things are going to work out for the good? because this Abraham showed an example of what God did for us. Abraham was willing to give his only son, his son of promise, up as a sacrifice. And that was just a prelude to what God did for us. He gave his only begotten son up for us as a sacrifice for sin that kept us separated from God. And so I was just reading that this morning, and I just thought about it. You know, it's amazing that God uses his children, his people, to be an example of his love for mankind. And I had to ask myself, am I being that example of God's love that people can see through me? And if I'm not, then I need to do some changing, and I need to amp up my faithfulness to God. But I love that he didn't just show this faithfulness that was displayed through the actions of Abraham, but he showed us different ways we could be faithful. I like where, if you look at verse 23, it says, by faith, Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents because they saw he was a proper child. And that proper just means a beautiful child, a child that they could just see God using. And so, and they were not afraid of the king's commandment. By faith, Moses, when he was come to years, I'm going to stop. I just want to focus on 23. You know, it says they were not afraid. And sometimes we think being brave or being not afraid means that there is no fear at all. No, being brave just means that in spite of the fear you might feel, in spite of the things that you feel like might happen, that you're going to do what's right anyway. And that's what Moses' parents did. Even though the king had said that every male child should be killed, they were determined that they were going to make sure that this child lived. And perhaps they knew something that everybody else didn't know, the greatness of that child. Perhaps they had a feeling that there was a greatness inside of that child, and wanted him to live so that he could do the things that God had for him in his future. And it's funny how he ends up in Pharaoh's house, raised by Pharaoh's child, and has the privileges of Pharaoh's house. And yet there's something bigger than riches of this world that called to him. Even though he messed up and did some things that were against what God would have us to do and how he would have us to live, that just lets me know that I can't mess up so much that God still can't use me. My mistakes in the past won't keep God from using me, from doing great things through me. And so I just love this little faith walk, an example of his faithful love. And, you know, that story of Moses just lets us know that God can keep us anywhere and everywhere. He can keep us safe. And that's all I have for us today. That was just a beautiful short walk through the faithfulness of God's love. So thank you for joining me this morning. I encourage you to go back and look at that chapter of faith in Hebrews again for yourself. Perhaps God will show you something different. Maybe he will show you more, but maybe it will encourage you to walk that faithful walk. I'll see you next time. Remember to walk through the Word of God before you go out and run and do your errands or enjoy your day, the rest of your day. And always remember that we are all blessed to be a blessing to someone else. I'll see you next time.